Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today Victoria Collier of Quid Pro Quo. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. It's good to be here. I'm excited.
So I discovered you hearing lawyers talking about buying and selling their law firms. Now, of course, you are also a lawyer, so not all my guests who do other things are not all lawyers. So I just want to get that out there in the beginning. But just in case, you have a podcast, you have a Facebook group, all these things. But in case my listeners haven't heard of you, Victoria, just go ahead, give us the primer on who you are, what you do.
Sure. So I am a lawyer, and I had my own law firm for 18 years before I sold it. I started it right out of law school with probably overinflated ego or confidence or arrogance, whatever word you want to use. But I had been a paralegal beforehand, and a paralegal from Texas and an Aries. So you combine all those three together, and it's definitely confidence.
So you said you were practicing law for a long time, or you were working at law firms. Why stop?
So I had owned and managed my own estate planning firm for 18 years, and I loved it. I still love that practice area, and I love the clientele. But I had gotten to a point where I didn't feel like I could take my law firm further. And that was coupled with my kids. I have twins. They were around 10 years old, and I just needed and wanted a different relationship opportunities. And then COVID hit, which was great. So I had bought a farm right before COVID hit and sold my law firm in February of 2020. And so it just worked out perfectly so that we could spend all that time on the farm, bonding in a way that you just don't see a whole lot with parents and kids anymore, especially as they're going into preteens. And I just felt like that was the critical moment of really getting close with them. So, so we have kind of the best of both worlds. We have a city house and a farmhouse, and that worked well for a while. But then I had lawyers who I had been coaching for years and years come around and ask me, "How'd you sell your firm?" So, well, I thought I was getting out of everything related to law. I am not.
It's a sorely underserved part of like what lawyers can do is like the selling of the law firm or the buying a law firm, but we also make terrible clients and customers. So I'm so sorry that you're sucked back in to serve lawyers of all people.
It's interesting because I used to say I don't really like lawyers, and yet since 2008, in addition to having my own law firm, since 2008, I've been serving lawyers through coaching and building up their practices, and now doing this. So apparently I do love lawyers, or at least I love making money off of them. I don't know.
Because what you're doing, though, is you're like obviously helping lawyers make more money, though, right?
Absolutely.
While like the legal tech providers who I have on the show, the founders of like some legal tech product, like that's going to take away law firm billable hours, like they have a much harder sell to lawyers than you do.
Yeah. Well, my core mission in life, my purpose, which I didn't know, so intentional as I was going through life. But as I look at all the different jobs that I've had, the careers I've had, I was a caregiver in a nursing home with elderly people. I certainly was an elder care attorney. I've done like long-term care products. And now I help lawyers sell and find life after law. The theme between all of them has been helping people live a better part of life through the asset preservation process, through planning for a future process. So that's the one core through everything. And so, yeah, I do hope that I'm helping lawyers not only, make money, but also be able to enjoy their life while they're making money.
So estate planning is often flat fee. I know you can't do billable hours, but what were you doing? Were you billing time? Were you doing flat fee, some kind of combination of the two?
When I started my firm, all the estate plans were flat fee. but I did do billable hours in probate as well as guardianship matters.
Mhm.
But before I sold my firm for about 5 years at least, we had switched to flat fees for probate and guardianship matters also.
And why did you make that pivot from billing time for those things to flat fees?
Well, because, your income is capped based on how many hours there are in the day when you're billing hourly, and then people would also question who's working on my case. And, it's, why, even internally, your paralegals, for example, why would one paralegal be billed out at X and the other one's billed out at Y? And they know what they're bringing home, in their own pocket. And they're like, my God, you're making like 10 times what I'm making off of this client. Because, I do feel that making a multiple higher than 3 is beneficial for us. So I thought, you know what? It just makes sense to find out, what is the average time we are spending on things? What do I want to make from a profit standpoint, which means I need to know my expenses. And then let's create our fees around that. Of course, we're lawyers. We have to make sure that they're reasonable in our area as well. But good thing that, there's a big range of what that means. But so even though I will tell you, Matthew, that even though we went to flat fee, which life is so much better under flat fee for
Preaching to the
everybody
choir
involved.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
everybody involved. But I did still require everyone in my firm to continue to chart their time that we spent on everything. Because how do you know you're being profitable if you don't know how much time you're spending on things?
You just answered like 3 of my follow-up questions. This is why I love having a seasoned speaker on the podcast, which is great. And, a lot of hosts will say, well, I was going to ask this and this, but no, I used to be a litigator and do depositions. You don't ask the question if they already answered it. So moving on, why did you have them still track their time?
So, for multiple reasons, and I even coach my clients to do this as well. And so, number one is if you ever get into a bar complaint situation and someone says, you haven't done anything on my file and you haven't returned my calls and you always push me off to the, junior associate who doesn't know anything. If you have good records, not only of what your activities are, but the amount of time it takes to do them, then you can easily answer a bar complaint. And unfortunately, I have the experience to be able to share that because I did have in my 18 years one bar complaint. And thank goodness we had all the data to include the time we spent, who spent how much time, and all that kind of stuff. So that's number one. And as an owner of a firm, I think that should be the most important reason is to protect yourself and protect your firm for the good services you do for people. Number two is, as I mentioned before, is, we can charge flat fee all day long, but if our legal assistant is spending 20 hours to draft a basic will plan, for example, then I'm losing money on that, right? And so I want to see, if we're profiting. I also want to see who in the production wheelhouse is spending the time and where they're spending it so that we can see if the right person for the highest best use of their skill set and economics is doing the tasks they should be doing. And so can we continue to allocate those to the right people and how much time are they spending? And it can lead to training opportunities because if someone is spending an inordinate amount of time on something and somebody else isn't spending that same amount of time, but on the same task, then maybe we have a training issue or we have a motivation issue. So I think it tells us a whole lot on the internals where we don't have to micromanage people, but it helps us be better leaders so that we can help guide them, mentor them, train them. And then ultimately that leads to profitability, which is why we have businesses is to, put money in our pocket, right?
I'm gonna piggyback off that. I'm gonna use that.
Mhm.
So speaking of profit, I feel like though, because my opinion is don't track any time whatsoever. Now, if they've been tracking time and they're pivoting business models, there might be a transitionary period. But here's why I suggest that it's just a transition and you have to get to not tracking time. We'll see what you think about this because it is about profitability. This is what it comes back to. I mean, there's other things too, and I'll give you my opinion on the bar complaint thing. It depends on the jurisdiction. We could just leave it at that. But if you know what you're charging these clients, now the less time you spend on these things and you're still providing the same level of service, the better, right? Like we could agree on
Right.
that. So
Yes.
it becomes the inverse relationship of time and money, where it's like, okay, now we know how much time you're spending on this. We've been able to reduce it by half. Do we need I think there's diminishing returns on time spent tracking compared to once you get it below a certain amount. Now we know we can do these so much faster. And maybe even we've adopted some kind of automations that help increase the value or the things that we can provide on top of now it's not taking this much time. So we could even maybe we could even charge more than we were charging before.
Yeah.
And so that inverse relationship of time and money, and we're just talking about from a profitability standpoint now, not from a bar complaint standpoint.
Mhm, mhm.
Aren't there, can you agree that there are those diminishing returns and maybe eventually you stop tracking your time?
So I agree with you that the inverse is good. We want to be spending less time on things and certainly being able to charge the same or more. I don't know yet in that short explanation that you're going to convince me that we shouldn't track time. And I'll give you one other reason. So I'm going to come back and try to convince you
Okay.
because the number one thing that I hear from it doesn't matter what level of employee it is, whether it's the owner, whether it's associates, paralegals, legal assistants, is everyone feels overwhelmed. But what I find is that it's not the workload, it is that they're disorganized. They don't know how to prioritize their activities. And when we can track time, I can tell you that I can easily spot check and go in and look at my employees' times. And I can say, well, you're not grouping your activities together. You're not acting like the factory so that you're in one modality. If I've got, all these petitions to do, I should be doing the petitions instead of petition, copy,
Mhm.
phone call, all that kind of stuff. So that I can quickly assess. The other is that I want to be able to know what my capacity is. And if we are at capacity or if we're over capacity or under capacity from a hiring standpoint. So, how do I know when to hire another person if all I know is the job's getting done? Right. But could we do more? Do we need more people to do that? Or do I have somebody over here who's under capacity while someone over here is over capacity? I don't know that unless I'm tracking time, but I'm open to learning if there's other ways to be able to measure those things so that people don't have to track time if there's other ways to do that.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the equation that you're using in terms of profitability too. Because I'll grant you that, yeah, if you have the mastery of, like, you could look at somebody's timesheets and sort of know how to better spend their time, like, there's value there. I also think it could be accomplished by utilizing, like, Scrum and Agile methodology with, like, having quick stand-up meetings, like, at the beginning of the day or beginning of the week or something. "Hey, here's all the things you're trying to accomplish. Are you having any impediments? How could I help remove them for you?" And I
Mhm.
feel like having those types of conversations help you identify those same sort of things while actually it's synchronous, but it's short because the
Mhm.
asynchronous nature of tracking time, because the time that's spent tracking time, I think is more valuably spent doing other things. Now with legal tech, there's a lot of passive time tracking. And so
Mhm.
maybe that's a sort of a hybrid solution where you're not actually telling your employees to track time because the technology is tracking it for you. So you, the owner, could still come in because I still feel like even if it just takes seconds to track what I just did, you talked about batching work together. Well, that's taking me out of the mindset of batching the work together. I have to track my time. What do you think?
I think that with the technology, I think that it is a hybrid situation. And, in my law firm, as well as in my current business, we do spend time with, having those micro meetings where
Yeah.
it's what's your focus for today? What did you accomplish yesterday? And it's so that we can align priorities. Nonetheless, I still see inefficiencies and stuff like that. So I love the new technology options that are coming out where it tracks the time for you, whether I'm on a call, my keystrokes, and when I'm in a file. So the more we can do it that way, I'm a huge proponent of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting back to the business of law, you sold your law firm, so you learned all about that for the first time. Was there anyone like you that you were able to go to at the time, or were you not able to find them and that's why you did it?
Well, if they existed, I didn't know of them. So I just knew that I did not have an option to just close my firm because I needed the financial benefit of selling it. I did, however, hire lawyers to draft the closing documents. I'm not a fool for a client. I did hire a business lawyer to draft my documents, but I did not have anyone do a valuation or anything like that because I didn't really know that that existed, which is funny because that's what I'm an expert in now is doing valuations of law firms. But so I started I was in coaching groups, and one of the coaching groups that I was in, they did a mock, scenario of we're going to buy your firm. So I came ready, because I actually was in the mindset of, yes, write me a check, right? And so we did a mock. They had asked some questions and then they gave me a mock offer. And I thought, if I could get that, that's good. So I went back to my firm and I started changing things to make my firm better. And I spent 2 years building my firm so that I could get what I wanted out of it financially. And so, it was a process. It wasn't just a decision, find the buyer and do some paperwork. There was a process involved.
Yeah. And of course, we're limited in the legal profession in that we could only sell our law firms to other law firms, which
Currently,
is
other than in Arizona and Utah.
right,
So,
right.
yeah,
And of course, they have to get past the regulatory hurdles to get to that point. So there's maybe that's time to improve your law firm to make it more sales worthy while they're doing that.
right.
I guess unless LegalZoom, which might be an ABS there now, wants to
It
allow
is
you to.
actually. They were one of the first. I think they're the
Yeah.
ones who got the law changed to begin with.
Right, right. I think they're going to be. I already know for a fact because we've had Alan Rodriguez on the show, and he's in ABS out in Arizona, and they're leveraging subscription and flat fee to provide legal services.
Right. Well, and I am actually going to be applying for a law firm out in Arizona this year as well. And we will be doing the same, leveraging flat fee and subscription services. So
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to that because I want to talk to you about that. And also, you could ask any questions of the subscription attorney as you're launching a subscription law firm, ABS
outstanding.
in Arizona. So, also, this is my episodic reminder of if you wanted to see, Victoria is only the second person I've had on the show that also has a QR code on their screen. So, if you wanted to see that, subscribe to the Substack at www.lawsubscribe.com. So, now that you sold your law firm, you've helped other attorneys buy and sell law firms. You see what you could actually sell a law firm for. So the three models, and there's hybrids of these, is billable hours, fixed fee, or subscription, right? I mean, let me know if I'm missing something. Those tend to be the three broad types of business models law firms could have. Which one seems to fetch a higher rate based on whatever multiple of gross or net revenue that you've seen?
And so I will add the fourth one is contingency. But
Oh, yes, of course.
yeah. I would say that any firm that has a subscription model that's going to dramatically increase the value of the firm. And so I'd say that's number one with regard to increasing the value. Number two would
Okay,
be,
episode over. There we go. We got it. Subscription's
yeah.
the most valuable. Go on.
Yeah, because it's predictable and it's recurring and it's, generally stable. So that's why it's so good. Secondarily, I would say flat fee. Third would be hourly. Fourth would be contingent.
And you did start to explain why subscription, but maybe even give a little bit more reasoning so the listeners understand. Obviously, everyone should go subscribe to Victoria's podcast, link in the show notes if you want to get all this information in more detail, but just give a little bit more reasons as to why it's in that order.
Well, what buyers are looking for is, everyone says, but once we get beyond the money part of it, we've got to know that that money is actually predictable. And that's the most important thing about subscription, or at least the most reliable thing, is that people are paying you on a regular, ongoing basis, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually, to provide a service, to be there for them. And so if you've got a number of clients and the attrition of those clients is so low, depending on the value you're bringing to them throughout that subscription program, you've got a solid, stable client base that's paying you regularly. That's predictable and it should be profitable depending on how you're running your business. So that's the number one reason why it brings so much value.
And then those benefits go away as you move into hourly and contingency, essentially.
Well, yeah, I mean, contingency is because you just never know when the big hit's going to happen if you
Right.
get a big hit, right? Hourly is just strapped to however many employees you have that can do the work that comes in the door. And so it's scalable, but I've heard someone say you can't sell people. And while that is true, you can't sell people. You can sell teams, which, but the teams that seem to enjoy their culture more are the teams that work under flat fee.
Now, when you sold your firm, was it named after you? Was it a brand name?
Not at the time I sold it, no. So when I started my firm to begin with, my name had to be part of the firm according to the ethics rules. So my name was a brand name with my name called the Elder and Disability Law Firm of Victoria Collier. So could it be any longer? Uh, so then when I was positioning to sell, not only for the positioning to sell part, but we were getting a lot of clients that were off brand based on the name I had because we did not do disability law. We pre planned for disability, but we didn't actually do disability. So I wanted to change the name anyway. And then so I did a doing business as the estate and asset protection law firm, period. So, my name was not there at all.
And why is that better?
Well, unless you're being absorbed by a bigger firm that wants to keep their name, it's better to buy a brand name because it's not tied to the owner. And so you can build your community goodwill with the brand of the name and not the person. And so that then as a smoother transition for the buyer. And so they shouldn't lose any business just because the owner's not there anymore because, I'm not the one who I was marketing anyway. I was marketing my team, I was marketing our services, and that was all under the generic name versus my personal name.
Yeah.
It's just more value.
So for some it may seem obvious, but I feel like for some lawyers, if you don't say things out loud, like
Mhm.
they might not actually come to the right conclusion. So you can't just have a really good brand and get the highest sales price. You can't just have the best business model, subscription, and get the highest sales price. And you can't just have the best team and processes and stuff and not have the other things and get the highest sales price. You have to have all three, right?
It is best to have all 3, and that's what I teach as far as, let's have a turnkey office, one that works for you, and that includes your brand, that includes your model, your team, your processes. And really what we're going for, Matthew, is how independent is this business from the owner, right?
Mhm.
And so when everything together is working the way it should, that owner should be able to walk away and it continues to operate. That's what a buyer is paying top dollar for.
Right. Right. Now, those are like the biggest pieces. Are there any other nuances, any other things that you might help a firm with that we didn't just talk about when you want to increase what they could sell their firm for?
Well, we look at all of those things and where your gaps are. And so, where can we improve? And so, if we, for example, have been practicing for 20 years and we've got a database of, let's say 2,000 people, but have you touched them? Are they warm? So, we want to warm up the list because people, that's why they're buying you too, is your list, right? So, you know, have you ever talked to these people since you finished the services? And, when you're on a subscription program, that's not near as, serious because of course you're talking to them. So your list is hot, hot, hot. But some people do work and they never talk to them again. But yet they're like, well, my list is 30,000 of who? I mean, do they even know who you are anymore? So we look at, what I call that a low hanging fruit. These are, this is money in your back door that you're just not even paying attention to, which actually can be a great thing for a buyer to come in and lowball and then actually reactivate all of those relationships.
Right. So depending on who you're representing in the transaction, you might be able to identify, hey, they haven't touched this list in a while, but you're going to get it once, you come in and then it will have some, yeah. So that's a really insightful point there. So yeah, you mentioned subscriptions again, and even something as simple as, and I'm seeing more and more of these as I do this show and I do CLEs on the topic, where some lawyers are doing like post transaction or post event, like divorce decree, estate plan is complete, just like annual maintenance plans,
Yes.
something simple that maintains the relationship every year, and they get some minimal or de minimis subscription benefits, and it's not necessarily a huge amount of money. I think there might be room for a premium version of that with maybe more touch points throughout the year. But I'm starting to see more of those. So even that is a warm list, even if it's just once a year check-in.
Oh, absolutely. And my estate firm, we had a client, what I called a client maintenance program. I didn't call that to the clients. It was a client care program to
Sure.
them. But, I mean, it's just like getting the oil change, every 3 months. And so ours was pretty robust. And we had touch points with our people no less than quarterly. They could, for example, get some updates for free. They got discounts off of other services, which in estate planning, I counted one day, there was like 8 different, graduations of services that you could provide to somebody. Well, if you've got, 3 graduations, you should have a client maintenance program or a subscription because they need you.
Right.
And I think you're doing a disservice if you're not offering it actually. So, but yes, that's a hot list.
Yeah, and like, did you charge annually for that or quarterly with the meetings, or how'd you charge? When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSubscribed at 650 and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSubscribed at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show.
So when I started the program, I charged annually, except that I quickly, after 2 years, realized that it was too much administration at the back end to send out all these letters at the end of the year, try to get paid at the end of the year or the beginning of the next year. And then, the client is like, it's around the holidays. Man, I could use that money for presents or something. So after reading The Automatic Customer by John Warlow, we went to monthly. And I liked that a lot better because number one, we could put it on automatic debit, right? Just all the time. We didn't have to send letters out. And the great thing about subscriptions, just like Audible and Apple and things like that, is it's just coming out. You forget about it. It's just part of the budget, right? You don't have to have that angst at the end of the year when that big check, request comes. So I like that. I like people not to have angst when they're paying my bills. It's just part of what naturally comes out of their account. So I went monthly.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of monthly. I just did it because when I was getting started trying to see like how am I going to comply with the ethics rules? Like they don't actually contemplate subscription, right? It's just like, well, this is a
Right.
recurred fixed fee, a recurred flat fee, depending on what your ethics rules say. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do month to month because that way I know they're getting a minimum of the subscriber benefits that I'm offering. Because I wouldn't say they're getting an update for free. I would just say that's subscriber benefits, right? Like that's a subscriber benefit that they're getting. So I wanted that to happen. And then I found, and I didn't know this going in, but I love sharing it, is when they do see that charge every month, they're like, oh yeah, I have a lawyer. I want to now maximize my subscription benefits. So I'm going to contact them. I'm going to do stuff. And that's your opportunity to provide that value so they stay subscribed and maybe even upsell them on something they do actually need.
Yes, and I love that, and what I love even more is that when they see that bill every month, you are now top of mind, and they are your biggest advocates, and they are your marketing, little army out there, so you don't have to oftentimes spend any more money on marketing. They are paying you to go out and do your marketing for you, which I love. They're your
Yeah,
biggest advocates.
absolutely. And one of the phrases I love to say is, would you rather spend money marketing or make money marketing?
That's right, that's right.
Even something de minimis, like my entry level subscription is $20 a month. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be expensive. I just got a client that booked a prospective client today that booked an intro call with me tomorrow because and I see that they're a particular kind of physician that I know I represent a physician in that sort of practice area. And I'm sure that that physician told a fellow physician about me, even though they're only getting that $20 a month charge, which is nothing for a physician, right?
Right, right. Well, you would think, but they are the worst money managers and business owners. So, I mean, only worse, the only other people that are close to them are lawyers.
Right. Right, exactly. Well, like, especially when they've had the displeasure of paying lawyers at the billable hour previously, like,
Right.
they really I think they do really appreciate, this is what it costs every month, and
Mhm.
it's not a big deal. I don't have to worry about any surprise bills, right? So, there's value there. But, yeah, make money marketing versus spend money marketing. We don't talk enough about that on this podcast. So I'm so glad you brought that up. The last thing I wanna ask you, and then we'll get into, like, what the law firm that you're gonna be building, this ABS in Arizona, and
Yeah.
that is, you've been helping law firms do this now for a few years. Have you seen any? Because it's still very nascent. Have you seen any subscription law firms try to sell themselves or anyone try to buy a subscription law firm? I don't expect the answer to be yes. We didn't talk about this in the pre-show, but I'm just curious to know.
My answer is no. I have seen and helped sell law firms that have like the client maintenance program, but nothing that's strict, subscription like what you do.
Yeah. I mean, the maintenance program is a version of it, I think. I mean, have those firms fetched, statistically or noticeably a higher price, do you think, in light of that?
I do. I do. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's still kind of anecdotal, but these are actual specific instances that happen. And so it's important to know that.
Right. Well, and I mean, first of all, I tell people just get started, just get started. And again, like you said, it doesn't matter what the amount is, just start building the base of clients that are enrolled. But then when you've got, people who have client maintenance programs that are paying, that are receiving like 250,000 a year, and that's on top of their other regular fees, of course that's a huge selling point. I'd buy it just for that, I mean,
Right.
so,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, they're, like you talked about, they're warm contacts. They're already paying you. And every time they contact you or you contact them because it's part of the subscription benefits, that's an upsell opportunity, including
Mhm.
for the next buyer of the law
Right.
firm. So it's like, it's not guaranteed recurring revenue, but it's so much more potential for future revenue that these other business models just don't have.
Right.
So moving into now, you're starting this ABS in Arizona, which is very exciting. Congratulations. Why are you doing that, and why subscription? And tell me what you're thinking around the business model and what practice areas.
Well, we are still just in the infancy stages, and I have a partner that has a lot of direction around it. But so the reason we're starting it is I co own another business in Tennessee that we serve veterans. And as that business, it's not a law firm, it's a paralegal services. And so there's things that we cannot do as paralegal services, but as a law firm, we could. So I am not licensed in Arizona, but I am a lawyer, but my partner is not a lawyer. And so I'm like, how can we do these legal services that naturally flow from this other business that we have to send out to all these other lawyers? And like, we're like losing so much money when we could do this ourselves. So it's literally taken me about a year and a half to, get to the place where my partner is comfortable owning a law firm, which I'm sure is maybe a little overwhelming for someone who's not a lawyer, right? And it's like across the country. Literally, it's like 1,845 miles because I was just interviewing someone on my podcast yesterday, and she's in Phoenix, and her law firm's in Atlanta. So I know exactly how far it is. But so 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 we are starting essentially a law firm to do planning for veterans when they have excess resources, just like I did in my elder law firm in Georgia, specifically to service the clients that come through our other business that cannot qualify for VA benefits unless they do the planning. And so my partner who's a non-lawyer, and I are going to start that in Arizona and provide that service. And it really does meet all the ABS requirements as far as we are serving an underserved population. Our fees will be less than what traditional lawyers charge. And I know what that is because I'm a traditional lawyer.
You're so
And
non-traditional, though. Come on.
that is true. I am completely non-traditional in my traditional ways. And as far as the subscription side of it, we plan to use a lot of AI interaction with our model and our clients. And because of that, we're going to be able to roll things out at a more convenient price. And we can do that, especially for veterans, we can do that where they can pay over time, which would be helpful to them.
Yeah. Okay. You said AI, so now I get to ask about it, and nobody could be mad that we're talking AI again.
Sure. I'm the one who brought it up. That's fine.
Right. Right. I know. It feels like every other episode I am talking to like a new Gen AI legal tech startup or something. No, you look, and that's great that you're doing that. I'm just kind of teasing. I mean, we could talk about AI, but I'm leveraging automations and AI to have a true solo operation that can offer affordable legal services. But like my overhead is, like $5,000 to $6,000. Not including any marketing or advertising, which I also do very little of because how am I going to compete with firms that have more money to spend on that, right? But what you're doing is, first of all, it's in a similar way I can relate because what I'm doing is like lawyers think I compete with them because I'm general transactional. I'm very broad, but I'm only inches deep. Like if somebody has a super complicated legal issue or problem or
Right.
circumstance, I'm going to refer that out. Of course I am, right? But most things, if you tackle it before it becomes a big problem, it only gets inches deep. So I
Right.
do and I don't compete with all lawyers, but I'm not really competing with them because these clients I'm representing in Illinois, they would have never hired those other lawyers in the first place. So like the veterans that you're going to be helping, like the lawyers have nothing to worry about you coming in and competing.
Right.
But what you're doing is going to show like other law firms, I think like me and some of the guests we've had on the podcast, that there are more efficient ways to provide legal services to a massive untapped latent legal market that you
Mhm.
could do more affordably. You just can't charge as much. And so I think we'll see because of what I'm doing, because of what you're doing, and you're going to be doing in Arizona, that will show more lawyers that, okay, I have to do this too. Because if I don't, then other lawyers will do it before me, and now I'll be out, or ABSs will do it, and I'll be out competed by them. Because eventually, that latent legal market may get saturated, or people might go upstream. Law firms might go upstream with a similar model that's more predictable. Do you see that potential future as well?
I do. I do. I'm in line with you there. And, I mean, lawyers can feel insecure all day long, but there's always been perceived threats, whether that's paralegals out there doing what they perceive to be legal advice, whether that's, the legal Zooms, but, the real question we have to ask ourselves as lawyers is what kind of client do I want? And do I have a product and a service that brings value to them to bring them in? And if it's anyone else outside of that, I don't care, let somebody else handle it, So,
Right,
you
right.
know?
And with AI, it's one of these things where the tools are out there, and whether
Hmm.
we like it or not, even if they say, they give all the disclaimers like ChatGPT and these other AI tools do, we're not lawyers. This isn't a substitute for legal advice because now they've been trained or programmed to say those things. People are going to go to those bots
Sure.
in AI and they're going to get the closest thing to legal services that they can because they can't afford expensive billable hours. So they're
Matthew,
already
I
doing
go
it.
to those things. I go to those things, I mean, I have a friend, she passed away not long ago, but before she did, her dog like bit a neighbor and she's like, can you help me draft something? I've already paid her XYZ. And I just went to ChatGPT and I said, draft me up a little, waiver thing, I mean, I don't do that kind of law either, but I'm smart enough to know what, should and shouldn't be in there. I just don't want to draft it from scratch, I mean, so
Right, right. But I think that's still though, that highlights why I don't think lawyers are going anywhere. Yeah,
no.
and we're going to be able to even expand the services that we're able to competently offer because if your friend just did that, who's not a lawyer, I'm assuming, and did it like they might have just used what it put out because they weren't able to analyze the output and say this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. So the
Right.
subject matter experts that we are in law, we can leverage these tools at scale in ways that other people just can't.
Or handle them in the litigation when that happens. So lawyers are always going to be necessary. The way I see AI, which I absolutely love, I just love it, is that it helps us do our job faster so that we can take on more capacity and help more people. And that's really why we're in business is to help people. And the more people I can help through efficiencies of systems and processes and affordability, by them being able to come in, that's what I'm here for, you know.
Right. It's fulfilling work, also speaking from personal experience. Now, you might not unless you I don't know, you might have plans to grow in Arizona, this new endeavor. But at least for me, like I'll never make the stupid money that big law lawyers make, but I've got work-life balance. I'm helping people. I'm helping more people than I ever would if I was billing my time. And there's just something that's so much more rewarding about that, even if I don't end up a stupid, multimillionaire at a big law firm who's been divorced 2 times and is estranged from my kids. Is it
Yeah,
worth it?
yeah. Well, I know. I mean, we all have to ask ourselves that, and then I just take it one step further and I say we can have it all. We can have it all. I mean, I've always had what I call life work balance, and because I'm not afraid to hire people, I'm not afraid to mentor them and build up other people so that I can do what I enjoy doing. And when you've got the right profit model, you can have it all. So, I do plan to build up QPQ, quid pro quo, so that I can serve as many lawyers across the United States to sell their practices when they're ready to do that. And a law firm in Arizona. Absolutely. I plan to be a small law firm that makes multi-millions.
Yeah, and you could still do that, but it's never going to be the stupid money that the managing
No,
partner at a big law firm is going to make. That was
no,
my point. Yeah,
no,
you
no.
can make way more than enough that you could ever spend in a lifetime still doing what you're
Yes,
doing. Yes.
yes, yeah.
So I hear that a lot, and I also hear that from like the maximum lawyer guys too about like, outsource, build the team, do all that so you could do whatever. But like the problem I have with that, which is it's a great thing, is it's always going to not be 100% sustainable forever because what you're doing, and this comes back to like Kant's categorical imperative, right? Where it's like whenever I say or do something, I'm imposing on all other people implicitly that they need to do and say those things too. And so like the people that you hire to outsource to so that you could go be a lawyer on the beach, which
Mhm.
that's like another, Facebook group that's very popular,
Yep.
is eventually those lawyers or team members are going to want to go and do that too. So you're like there it's like the never-ending cycle of having to like find people to fill those positions as the people you train and bring up leave and go. And maybe that's fine and that's okay too. But it's just like when you're living that prime example, they certainly, I got to imagine the type of people that you want to bring in to help run the practice and run the business are going to see that and say, okay, I'm going to strive for that too at some point.
You'd be I'm actually surprised that that's not the case that I see for the most part. I don't see that, first of all, most people want the responsibility of the leadership it takes to be a CEO of a business that's
Hmm.
growing. Of course, they want the benefits of the beach. And I think that if you develop the culture right, they get the benefits of the beach as long as they're doing what they want to do. But I find that most people actually are grinders, not minders. And minders are the ones that, are the visionaries. And so, they may want the benefits. And I think that there's ways to create that. So, Dan Kennedy is somebody that's, been around forever as far as business, you know, the business godfather, I'd say. And he has this, principle of the theory of two, two copiers, two receptionists, two, and I
Oh yeah.
wholeheartedly believe in that
Yeah.
because you're right. I mean, I'm a person of, develop people until they no longer until they outgrow you. And I am perfectly good with that. I want to make everyone the best of who they are. And if I can be part of that, even if that means that they're at some point leaving me, that's okay because I've got other people I'm developing below them, right? But for the most part, if you've got a great culture, they're not gonna wanna leave you. They wanna stay there.
That's a great rule of two, and I'm not familiar with that, but that's great. It makes me think about like biology as an example, right? We've got two lungs, two kidneys, and so like for the things that are super important, but you're able to train somebody up and do that. But then you got the super complicated things, the brain, the heart, the liver. Those might be harder to replace, but also they're good. It's once you're there, it's hard for somebody to maybe move. I don't know about the whole minder grinder thing because I feel like with the right coach
Mhm.
a grinder can become a minder, right?
Mhm.
You can
Mhm.
always coach people up.
Yeah.
I guess there might be something inherent in who they are, but I feel like if somebody had just the even the tiniest spark to be a minder, but
If they
didn't,
want it to be.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But, like, for example, there's a coaching client that I have that, is a law firm, and she's hired this lawyer, and I knew him when he worked at another firm, and he never wants to be the one who makes a decision with a client. He never wants to be the one who manages people. He just wants to design plans and draft plans and, sign plans ever. And so she could want him to move up all day long, but he's never going to want to. And so she never has to worry about him taking her business and going
right,
away. Right.
right,
So,
right,
yeah.
right. So when it comes to then the subscription, as we start to wrap up the interview here, when it comes to the subscription that you're thinking about, like, are you doing a one type of subscription, yes or no? Are you doing a tiered approach? Are you doing subscription plus a la carte, like the Costco model? Like what sort of model are you looking at or models are you looking at? Realizing that it's early.
Right. So with our type of service, there's things that working with veterans that we're prohibited from charging for. And then there's things that they absolutely need on a regular basis. So if we're doing estate planning for them, we would be certainly having them enroll in the opportunities for reviews on a regular basis throughout the year because things change because all of our clients need long-term care. So
Mhm.
things change daily with regard to care needs. And so, there's that. But then there's, that's the first thing I can think of. I don't know about fleshing out too much other than that
Yeah.
at this point, so
Yeah. So it's just finding the right price point and seeing
right.
what's reasonable, what they'd pay that you could scale and grow. Yeah. What kind of technology are you looking at using to launch that ABS?
So, our other company uses Salesforce as our client management database, and so with that, we have basically all of our forms that are integrated into it, and so, we just do some input data and all the forms come out. So that's helpful. And we're going to be designing our trust to do the exact same thing versus using any other platform for trust. So those are the two big ones.
And then for like the rest of a tech stack, or maybe even some things that you're seeing some of your attorney clients do so that they could increase the salability of their firms, like what scheduling tools are they using? Payment processors are they automating? Like what's some
Yeah.
of the technology out there that a law firm can use to make themselves more automated to also help them be more saleable at a higher number in the future?
Right. So, one of the things that we're doing is we're going to have an intake department that does the call to see if it gets on the salesperson's calendar. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to have them link right to the calendar, be able to see that, even though it might be a different company doing that and get right into the calendar. And so, when we do that, then there's also the payment that once we schedule the appointment, automatically they're going to get the agreement and the payment and things like that. So just trying to tie in the technology, whether we use Calendly or LawPay or Clio or whatever, all that is yet to be determined, but certainly the different platforms that integrate to each other so that it's basically a click of a button and six different transactions happen.
Right, right. I've had Sam Molai on the podcast, my Legal Academy, and I think he's got something like this is like no joke, he's like 20,000 plus zaps in Zapier to automate
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
It's sort of mind-boggling to get all the technology to talk to each other.
It is.
So, but that's like, I mean, if it doesn't talk to each other, maybe there's like a make.com is another one. They just integrated Gen AI, so you could say to it, I want to connect this with that, and I want it to do this in natural language, and then it will give you like a suggested workflow of like automating
Oh,
something.
nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Need to write that
fascinating
down.
stuff. Yeah,
Make.com. Yeah.
yeah, make.com. No unique spelling or anything. It's
Yeah.
definitely an open tab on my tabs to like go and play around with that tool. So before I ask you the last question, I ask all my guests, since you yourself are a podcast host and you're about to start a subscription-based law firm, I want to open it up to you. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I would say that, when you're starting your subscription based law firm or just business, what have been the biggest challenges for you? Is it is it people valuing that the subscription is, you know, as good as a non-subscription lawyer that charges the big fees, even though they're hourly, you know what I mean? Or is it something totally different? Because that to me would be what I think the mindset challenge would be.
No, that's a really good question, and I will tell you I've debated many times because the law firm is Subscription Attorney LLC, so like super generic, right? And sometimes it's like, oh, you've hired like the target lawyer, and some people
Mhm.
don't necessarily want that, if especially if there's a dispute or a negotiation or something. They want other name on the letterhead. So I've dabbled with thinking of like Curbis Legal Service as an alternative brand. I'd have to get a separate malpractice plan for that though, so I'm waffling on something like that. So there's even something to be said about getting certain clients that want to hire a traditional sounding law firm, right? Having
Mhm.
that on letterhead. So that was a lesson that I learned. I think I have lost some clients because of that, but that's okay. I'm still profitable and it's all good. But there's something to that. So about picking like the brand and what you call it, I think I think something I discovered that I didn't know is even when they're unsubscribed, and this might just be because I'm very broad, they still think of you as their lawyer because you have to make it really easy to unsubscribe and resubscribe. Self-service, right in the client portal. And I have had clients who have unsubscribed and then come
Yeah.
back all on their own without me ever having to reach out to them again because they know I could help them with that thing. And so that's been a huge boon. And because it's only $20 a month to get started again, I mean, I have higher
Mhm.
subscriptions, of course. It's a no-brainer. So I think finding that no-brainer price for the market you're trying to serve matters a heck of a lot.
Mhm. I would think that there'd be a challenge around the ethics of that because, there's all the ethics rules about, doing a closure letter and letting the client know when they're not a client and all that kind of stuff. But if they can jump on and off your system,
It's very clear in my engagement agreement.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
engagement agreement is very simple and it's on my website. Everyone can go to subscriptionattorney.com/#engagement. It's compliant with Illinois, but
Yeah.
I borrowed from a lot of other subscription lawyers out there to put that one together. So it's very clear and that engagement agreement is communicated to them at least 3 times before they sign up as a client.
So I just have one more last question, and then I
Yeah.
literally have to go give
Yep.
a webinar. But my question would be: they're on a subscription, they're paying $20 a month or whatever your higher ones are, but you've done something that's worth like $5,000, and they're paying $20 a month, and then they go off subscription after you've completed all the work. How do you recover the rest of those thousands?
First of all, everything's paid in advance, and it's $20 a month gets you access to the subscriber benefits, which includes my a la carte pricing, like $50 a page. So I'm charging $50 a page for every like random page thing, for simple estate plans, for prenups, for things that I have automated where I'm doing almost no manual work whatsoever. I charge
Mhm.
less than $50 a page, and all my pricing's on my website, and so there's no surprises. And I get paid in Illinois. If you charge the fixed fee up front, that could go right into your operating account before the work is done. You just have to refund it if you don't do the work. And so
Okay.
I get paid up front for everything. So it's just access to scheduled calls and access to the a la carte services. It's like the Costco model. In order to first shop
Great.
at Costco and get all the deals, you must first become a member of Costco. That's my approach, and that's worked really well.
I love
Um,
it.
Two quick questions for you, then you can run. The last ones, they're very easy. First, is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
A hot dog is like a sandwich because it's on bread. But if you eat it on bread, it's not a sandwich if you don't eat it on bread. So there's qualifier there.
Okay,
It's a
there you
sandwich.
go. And then if people wanted to follow up with you, Victoria, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So I would say just go to our website, quidproquolaw.com. And if you need a consultation, you can book it right there on the website.
All right, thank you. All right, well, Victoria, thanks so much for coming on the
Thank
podcast.
you.
Law Subscribed.
It's fun. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.